go.
Morning, everyone. We'll just give it obviously a couple of minutes for everyone to join, and then we'll start at bang on 10 o'clock because we have a lot of stuff to get through today.
Sorry, Crystal, I can't quite see your screen if you're sharing.
Thanks for letting me know, Boris. Yep, it was meant to be. I'll switch that.
Good pick off.
Yeah.
We tested it and it was working.
Yeah. Just because.
Can you hear me all right?
Redo it.
We got you, Glenn.
All good.
You got me? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
That looks good, Crystal. It's coming up now.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. We are going to kick off at 10 o'clock on the dot because we do have a lot to get through today. Welcome, everyone, to our webinar series with Informed Decisions, or .id. For those that don't know me, my name is Lisa Harwood. I am the Principal Policy Advisor, Economic Development at WALGA. And for those who haven't heard of our partners today, .id, they provide a range of online tools and consulting services around demographic, housing, and economic trends to support local area decision making. So today, they're going to take you through a whole range of insights when it comes to housing, workforce, and livability. We know that these topics in particular are of critical importance to you, so there's often more demand for data in this space, and we thought that would bring .id in to share some of that today. Just really before we kick off, this session will be recorded. So just switch off your cameras if you don't want to be included. So we have sort of started a bit of a library of economic development webinars on the WALGA website. So you can go and return to those resources at any time, and this will be added to that collection. I know this is the most popular question when it comes to webinars. Yes, the slides will be sent around post-event. So don't worry about that. And there will also be plenty of time for questions. So we ask you to hold on to those until the end of the presentation, but you can either raise your hand or pop it in the chat, and then I'll help kind of facilitate that. That's it for me. I'm going to hand you over to the data experts now. So today we have Glenn, Crystal, and Boris. I think we're going to kick off with Crystal.
You are. Thank you, Lisa. So today we are going to go through the impacts of demographic shifts on communities and for regional WA and how that's going to change the way that councils see, plan and deliver services, how they see the issues, plan for their services, their strategies and how they deliver. We're going to also give a quick overview of regional WA, so the demographics, who lives there, who works there, who's moving there, housing costs, things like that, how livable regional WA is. And within that, we're going to be threading through ways that you can get ahead of that game. So once you understand the issue, how to get ahead of this. And we'll be using our suite of tools, which many of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with, to help demonstrate all of this. So just to kick us off, though, just a bit of a warm-up. You either loathe or love these, but we will be doing a bit of this throughout. So if you could please grab out your phones and scan this QR code, or you can log into Mentimeter and pop in the code. I just find the QR code's the easiest way. And just very, very quickly, we're just going to spend just 1 minute on why did we include in the title nappy changes, trees, sea and nappy changes. Why would we include that in a webinar around the impact of demographic shifts? And just excuse me while I get into the next screen. While that loads, hopefully you guys have got yourselves logged in. Wonderful, we can see a few things there. So you'll see on your phone a few boxes there where you can just pop in a word or two and hit submit. So why nappy changes? So possibly because there's more babies, it's regional, young families, yep, seeing babies there a bit, grows the population, the impacts on childcare, families, yep, so you can see some themes popping up here. Families, young families, growth, population. And all of these, thank you. Oops, stop sharing, get out of that one. All right, clunkiness over. So the answer to this is all of those things. So tree, sea and nappy changes, obviously migration, people moving in and out of areas for tree change, sea changes, other economic reasons. Nappy changes, though, actually relates to a blog that Greg, who you'll meet soon, wrote for us around how the increasing retirement age lowers fertility. And it's that there is evidence to prove that increasing the pension age has an increase on fertility because it reduces the availability of grandparents to provide childcare, because grandmothers work longer, who typically tend to provide most of the childcare when it is provided by family. Therefore, they're unable to provide the childcare. The daughters will have less or no children. The families decrease in an area. Schools and daycares close. Therefore, families might move out if there are no schools or daycares to care for their children. You end up with a community full of big homes but small households, which can lead to an increase in affordability. So policy changes like this can have big impacts on demographic implications. So we know that migration as well and changing economic environment can impact regional areas. And to start us off in this exploration, Boris, our man on the ground in WA, is going to outline a few of these characteristics here. Over to you, Boris.
Thanks, Crystal. Morning, everyone. So I'm just going to highlight some challenges and opportunities that we're hearing from some of our clients in regional WA and what we're seeing on the ground. First of all, is the geographic distance. WA and its 9 regions is a massive state. And this is the greatest, or at least the most unavoidable obstacle, particularly for key infrastructure components like health and other key quality of life infrastructure like education, which is why we see a lot of boarding schools, private boarding schools as well in Metro WA. And what we've also seen is that even climate change components and challenges are complex and acute, and they differ from, say, northern part of WA to the southern part of WA. We know that industry transitions also disrupt local employment and identity, and mining is a well-known use case for that, particularly some of those smaller mining towns or places where an industry really dominates a local economy and its community as well. We know that the destination areas are struggling to balance housing needs for locals and tourism, particularly in the southwest. And we know that affordability is worsening. Housing affordability in particular is worsening. And this is somewhat new for WA. The eastern states have had this a lot longer, but this is a new challenge for WA. And that's also exacerbated by the increase of construction costs and capacity challenges within the construction sector in WA that constrain the need for those houses. So it's a bit of a wicked problem there. And the last thing I'll probably raise is social cohesion. We saw some of that sort of explode over the weekend, and that is not, and regional WA is also not immune to some of those challenges, and also including with the First Nations community as well. If we jump to the next slide. I just talked about some challenges within regional WA, but there's also heaps of opportunities in regional WA as well. We know that some of the newer industries can bring local jobs and lift the economic standing. Some of those renewable energy projects come to mind. And WA's performance in terms of economic performance also somewhat offsets some of the challenges that are particularly seen over east. And that's not to say that it's a silver bullet, but it's certainly having a positive impact. We know that regional WA tourism remains strong and there's demand for tourism still. People still want to come to regional WA, both international and domestic. And we've got some good examples of social cohesion in WA as well. I think Canning is a great example that we shouldn't forget as part of that as well. And we also have a state government with the capacities to spend, and I won't get into the politics of that, but the state government does have the cash to spend, and that's a luxury that some of, say, my Eastern States colleagues don't really have in their home state. Whether they spend or not, now that's the politics behind it. A good example that we've seen in the Shire of Ravensthorpe that I thought just worth mentioning here is with the lithium's mine closure. There was an article earlier about leaning into the digital transition and seeing some of those digital nomads and attracting them into the local economy. So that might be some opportunities for regional WA as well. Can we jump to the next slide? So what should we do? What we aim to do is to really to understand people and place to better facilitate sustainable growth in your local areas. And some of the components that you can look to measure and monitor are households, population futures, community views, if you just click through, Crystal, prices, affordability, economic conditions, workers, technology supply, and these will all help you understand what your community is, where's it headed, and what are the things you might have to plan for in the future. And I might just hand over now to Glenn, who's our resident demographer, to talk through some demographics and to give an overview of the demographics in regional WA. Over to you, Glenn.
Thank you, Boris. Yeah, great to be presenting for regional WA. Very interesting demographic trends across the region. The population growth has been really strong. There we go. Got the slide there. But some of the characteristics of the last census, always got to remember when you're looking at the last census, it is getting a little bit old now, and things like on that slide, the mortgage and rent in particular getting quite out of date. Now, Crystal's going to cover quite a bit about housing and housing affordability, but those numbers which are on our Australia profile site, you can break down to regional WA, but we've had a lot of interest rate rises since the census, and a lot of rent increases. In fact, rents in many areas have gone up 50% since that time. But the interesting thing about regional WA, it is a little bit older than the state, but not as old as some areas. The oldest place in the state is actually Mandurah. The regional areas as a whole, a little bit older than the Metro. High percentage of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, making up 8.4% of the total. And the median income is really interesting, which is the highest of any regional area in Australia. So most of the regional areas have lower incomes than the capital cities, and that is the case in Western Australia, but the gap is smallest in Western Australia, with the influence of mining being strongest there. Next slide, Crystal. Yep. So the population change, when we look at the population change at an LGA level, we see this is 5 years of population growth between 2019 and 2024. Western Australia's population has seen a huge increase since 2021. At the census happened when the borders were closed with COVID. So the last census, we had quite low population growth. When the borders finally reopened, which was later in WA than any other state, and you also had state borders closed as well as international borders, Western Australia piled on the population with a trend towards increasing both overseas and internal migration. The region strongest in places just outside of Perth's fringe, like Gingin and Chittering Shires, but also the southwest places like Augusta, Margaret River, and Dandaragan also had a significant growth there along the coast. Some areas like parts of the Pilbara recorded population declines, but that is much more fluctuation due to mining trends and components of population change, which are on your screen now. You can see that 2021 was quite low population growth, and entirely due to natural increase. We actually had negative overseas migration and interstate migration. The overseas migration component really picked up there in 2023 and 2024 and made up the largest share in both of those years. And that's in line with a national trend towards high overseas migration. But interestingly, also the interstate or internal migration for regional WA includes migration out of Perth and from other states, that turned positive, and it turned positive for the whole state as well. So more people coming in from other states and more people coming in from Perth, which turned around during COVID. Like 2021 was a real pivot point for that. And it's important to note when you look at the census data that you are looking at that lens of 2021, and things have moved on since then, although our population figures that we have since then are subject to review after we get the next census information. And it does, recent resource development expenses have reversed those trends. So certainly some of that is due to the mining industry. And during COVID, more people started coming from interstate, and that certainly continued on since then. You can see the overall migration. That's the last 25 years of migration. So Western Australia, this is the state overall, not just regional Western Australia, but the state migration trend really fluctuates. Was strongly negative in the mid-2010s, and then after 2021, really strong interstate migration. That last bar there is only half the year, and we get another quarter of that in a couple of weeks. So we'll have a look at what that's doing. Next slide. Okay, so time for the quiz. Crystal, you're driving this one. So
yeah, I'll drive this one. So I'll just say, everybody, if you did use the QR code before, it's the same one. So if you've submitted, it should bring up the next screen. Let's give it a run.
So I'll go through the questions and give you a minute or so just to put in an answer. Then we'll have a chat about the results on that. So the first question is 2023-24 saw record population growth across WA. But what was the growth rate of regional WA as a whole in that year? You can see a few answers in there. I'll give people a couple of minutes to put in there. 0.5, 1.2, 1.5 or 2.2. So we've got a few for 5, 2.2. So sounds like that's about it. So the correct answer there was 1.5%. The growth rate for regional WA, which was substantially less than recorded in Greater Perth. Western Australia overall was the fastest growing state for that year, subject to review after the next census, but certainly strong population growth, and that's that 1.5% for regional WA is only slightly below the national average, but it is lower than Perth there. Right, we can go to the next question. The next question is Busselton had the largest growth in regional WA of 1,019 people. That's the largest growth, but which LGA outside of Perth had the highest percentage growth as a percent of their population in 2023-24? So percentage growth can often be a little bit different to total population growth because it is dependent on your population size to start with. So we've got quite a range of responses. Only one person thinks it's Shark Bay. Well, we got the answer there is actually Gingin, and that is really growing because it's only just outside of the Perth metro area. A lot of people moving there for sort of the lifestyle within commuting distance. So some of the amenities and employment centres on the fringe of Perth in particular. Gingin's was 4.6%. All of those ones listed actually in there grew faster than the WA average. Right, the next question, which is the only LGA which is officially, by the ABS, officially split between metropolitan Perth and regional Western Australia? So there's various definitions, but the ABS have a specific definition for metropolitan Perth or specifically the Greater Capital City statistical area. And you can see a few coming in there. So the correct answer there is actually the Shire of Murray, although 90% of Murray's population is within Greater Perth. There is about 50% of the area is outside of Greater Perth in regional WA, mainly the small town of Dwellingup. So a lot of people thought Serpentine Jarrahdale. It's actually all in WA in Metro. Next question. In 2021, which regional WA LGA was the biggest nappy changing location, at least as a percentage, with the highest proportion of population under 5 in the whole state? Halls Creek, Lake Grace, Upper Gascoyne or Plantagenet? Now this is, I stress, as a percentage of population. All of these are fairly small population areas and there will be higher numbers of under 5s in other areas. Okay, so most of the votes there for Halls Creek. And the answer to that one's actually Upper Gascoyne, which is tiny. It's only got tiny in population, not tiny in area. It's got 11% of the population aged 0 to 4, but it's only got 200 people all up. So it's how sometimes you can get percentages showing different things to what you may expect in there. But all of those had a relatively higher proportion than average. Next question. Augusta, Margaret River, Denmark and Exmouth have the distinction of being 3 of the 4 what nationally? Oldest areas by median age, highest rates of people who walk to work, smallest average household size, or least religious population. So they are 3 of the 4 top areas for what?
This is a really interesting
think
one.
about this one. Most people voting for smallest average household size there.
I'm going to hit the answer.
We're going to go. Okay, the correct answer is actually least religious population. So only 2.
It didn't actually
only
show
2 got that one. So the both are, they're all around 60% of people who have no religion, according to the census. And the only other area in the top 4, this is nationally, the only other area in the top 4 is the city of Yarra in Victoria. So the other 3 of the top 4, all in regional WA, with Augusta River for 60.1% being the top one. And the final question is about volunteering. 14.5% over 15 volunteered Australia-wide. 1 regional WA topped the nation in this category as well. Which one was it? Mount Marshall, Condinan, Wickepin or Tammin? Top the nation for volunteering. We did have a significant decline in volunteering rates across Australia, which was a COVID effect in the last census. It was very hard to volunteer in some cases, but one of these LGAs topped the list.
All right, I'll hit the answer soon, and hopefully it was input into the system. Let's have a look.
Yeah,
Not then again, you'll have to reveal it, Glenn.
Oh, okay. So what wasn't there? Okay. So the answer is Mount Marshall, which is only one person put that one, and that had 46.5% of population being volunteer, which is 3 times the national average. So more than 3 times the national average. So highest in the country, Mount Marshall. Thanks for indulging the quiz. I hope it's been interesting. Always a few interesting points about your areas, and it's so diverse within regional WA. There's lots of different things that we can pick up there. Some of those trends. I'll pass over to Crystal now for the rest of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Glenn. It was a little more exciting in person when we could throw chocolates across the room to the correct answers, but. Thank you everyone for indulging that, as Glenn said, and it just shows Glenn's level of expertise in all areas across Australia, which is pretty impressive. You will notice, actually, I'll just say on the Mentimeter, there is further questions. That's for just a little bit later on today, so just hold off on answering those ones for now, because for the moment I'm going to take you through a bit around housing and affordability and key workers. So for regional WA, or regional areas in general, you're quite often faced with questions like, when affordability impacts regional areas, you get people like early childcare workers, the key workers in lower paid roles. Their roles are vital to the community, but they can't afford to live near their work. Communities can lose then those vital services, which leaves you asking, who's going to mind the kids then? When tourism as well is vital to the regional economy, as it is in many places, housing markets in those areas can be out of reach for those staff in those lower paid tourism roles, so cleaners and admin. And so some councils have even had to postpone significant economic development due to the lack of staff. And keeping key workers close to work is best for the economy and the social fabric of the community, but it can be a challenge in regional areas. You need to balance that economic stability with community wellbeing. You need to have a certain amount of homes in those tourism areas to cater for the tourism economy, but then those local families can struggle to afford the low amounts of rental stock that are there, or even homes to purchase. It can create competition as well between the public sector housing and private sector needs. So, for example, Kimberley's had a high amount of property held by government for its workers, but then that puts strain on the private sector for finding homes for their workers. And new industries in an area can create added demand on local housing stock, often when there is already housing strain. So new workers will also need to be able to afford the local market. So again, if that industry is potentially a lower paid industry, then they're going to have, it's going to exacerbate their housing struggles even more. For regional WA in particular, 12.5% of all workers in regional WA are what we call key workers. So that's your typical definition of like essential workers, your nurses, doctors, childcare workers, teachers. That's pretty much on par with the Australian average, by the way, which is 12%. Just slightly shorter commutes for regional WA workers compared to WA workers generally at 6.6 Ks. And the median individual income of a key worker in regional WA is just over $1,300. It's only a few dollars short of what workers in regional WA earn generally, but the proportion of all workers in regional WA that earn more than $3,000 per week is 10%, whereas the proportion of key workers in regional WA who earn more than $3,000 per week is only 2%. So that is a huge difference. So considering the average wage is pretty much the same across the two, there is still those outliers in the top area that is more heavily weighted to just workers generally. So the key working constituent is actually lower paid, which then, you know, as we said, that can create these issues here. Our Housing ID tool can help local government areas have a look at worker affordability. And the way that we've chosen to demonstrate this in the Housing ID site is just the top 10 occupations. So the top 10 workers by number, so how many workers were in each of these occupations as at the census, and how much of the local housing stock at that time they could afford based on the average weekly income. It's a bit of a thing to get your head around. Maybe we can pull that apart a bit in the questions. But just as a visual here, if you have a look at these top 10 workers in this regional local government area, pretty much all of those occupations could afford the sales listings within the December, I think it's the 12 months to December 2020 period, or is it the 3 months, Glenn? I've just gone blank on that.
That's 12 months normally. We
12
do
months
that
up to 2020, yeah. So in 12 months to 2020, pretty much all of the sales listings would have been affordable to any one of these income groups, occupation groups. If you look at the 12 months to December 2024, that's dropped considerably for a bunch of those. The mixed crop and livestock farmers there, and crop farmers and livestock farmers. So they're all the ones that are struggling the most in the current sales market. So quite a change there in those 4 years. The Housing ID site can also have a look at affordability generally across different income brackets, not just the worker types. So the very low, and moderate income brackets in 2020, the moderate income and the low income bracket could comfortably afford the sales that were listed in that time period. So 95% of all sales listings would have been affordable to the low income bracket in the 12 months up to December 2020. And that's dropped to 60% in the current year that we have on record there. So only 60% of all the sales listings would have been affordable to a low income bracket in this local government area. We've actually just demonstrated here, it's a Western Downs actually in Victoria is a regional site that's a regional council that has the Housing ID site. So we've just demonstrated this one here, and it can show you too the small areas within your local government area and how affordable they are. So I've just demonstrated here of the low income group, how many of those listings and what percentage would have been affordable for that group in that time frame. So our partners at PropTrack, that's where we get our affordability, or rather all our listings information, and then we do the calculations on affordability. And I've just pulled out here for regional WA as a whole, what the median and entry level unit and house prices for rent or purchase are. And what is incredible here is the percentage changes in the last 12 months, because usually quite often you see single digits and often also in the negative. And just to help demonstrate that, I put in here what the comparable VIC change over time was. So as you can see here, the entry level unit for purchase in regional WA increased by 23% in the last year, but in Victoria it decreased by 8%. So it's just showing the considerable strain that WA generally actually, but regional WA is feeling in their rent and purchase markets. A recent REA report actually showed that since 2020, rents have increased more in WA than in any other state. So that a previously held concept that WA was an affordable area is really being challenged. So that's an 80% increase since the onset of COVID, which is bringing WA to its worst level of affordability on REA records. So it just shows how imperative it is to track those rental costs and those purchase costs over time, and how affordable that market is to your local communities. Before we have a look at the livability of regional WA, just having a quick look at industry expansion. So the National Skills Commission has identified these 5 key areas for growth. And for WA in particular, they're looking at focusing efforts on these industries. The Shire of Ashburton is an example. They've come to ID wanting to understand the impact of resource projects, FIFO workforces, and opportunities for diversification. And what we found is that the population and workforce fluctuate with resource project cycles, and that leads to Australia's largest population decline between 2016 and 2021. This creates unstable demand for services, while limited health and social services make it harder to retain long-term residents. The Shire also struggles to compete with larger centres due to its dispersed population. And future growth in this area will remain tied to gas and iron ore, but there are strong opportunities in renewables, critical minerals, tourism, agriculture, and education. Greater investment in community facilities and services is essential to improve livability and support the long-term resilience of this community in Ashburton. So now we're going to have a look at livability. Sorry about that. So one of our services is our community views service. So we survey the community. We've just actually completed a recent Living in Australia survey, but we also do this at a local government area level. So what we'll show you here now is the data from our Living in Australia 2025 National Community Views Survey that shows that residents in regional WA rate livability of their areas higher than the national average. So for the national average, it was 59.5. That was the livability score, and I'll explain how that's calculated in a moment. Regional Australia was just very slightly below the national average. Metro Australia just slightly above. But regional WA overall had a livability index score of 61. So how did they get to that? We ask the community that we survey, what makes somewhere a great place to live? And we have a look at these 16 different attributes. And our survey asks them to rank their top 5 most important values in making somewhere a great place to live. Then they're asked to rate their experience of that value. So their experience against their highest values then determines the livability score. So what were those values that were ranked highest among regional WA residents? It was feeling safe, the natural environment, health services, affordable decent housing, and a sense of community. So we're just going to do a little activity now to see how you would rate your experience of these values, just as the participants of the survey did. So there's the code again, in case you didn't have it before. If you just open up your phone again and go back to that Mentimeter quiz. Great, we've got some answers there already. So how do you rate your experience between 1 and 10, 1 being very poor and 10 being excellent, of each of these attributes? And you just slide the scale there, and it will give us a ranking. I'll give you a couple more seconds while I get some water to enter your score there. And then in just a moment, I'll show you what the actual score was for each of those for regional WA. So what have we got there? Feeling safe at 8.2, 7.9 for natural environment, 6.6 for health services, 3.2 for affordable decent housing, 7.1 for sense of community. Okay, so let's see how it actually did score. Okay, so feeling safe, you've all ranked that or rated that at 6.7 was the resultant score. That was actually you ranked it at 8.2. That was actually 6.7. The natural environment, you ranked it at 7.9. It was 8.2. Health services, 6.6 versus 5.4, not too bad. Affordable, decent housing, yours was slightly lower at 3.2. And sense of community, you had actually quite high up at 7.1, but actually the regional WA experience overall was 6.5 for that attribute. So what does make it a great place to live? So you can see there in the orange, those top 5 attributes, the top 5 most important ones, the orange ones there. And most of those, 3 of those are up the top, but unfortunately falling down to the bottom is affordable, decent housing and health services, the experience of those being very poor. And it's no surprise then that the things that are impacting most on livability in regional WA are related to affordability and housing. But this is an overall view of regional WA. You can actually get this survey completed for your local area. Canning has done this, so I've just put the website there where you can type that in, and we can send that to you afterwards as well if you want to have a look at what that looks like at a regional local government area level. So with all of this considered, how do we get ahead of the game here? So this just means by understanding all of your the issues facing regional WA, what can councils do to get ahead of that game? So you understand it, so you're not just faced with the issues and you're constantly reacting to the issues as they come up. What can you do to look behind, look at your current situation and plan for the future? So you reflect on the past, you're looking at the trends over time, you're looking at migration patterns, as Glenn went through very briefly, you're looking at the settlement history, levels of housing stress in the past, so as that's 2021 census, even looking at 2016 and looking at that trends over time. Measure and monitor the present, so looking at local housing supply and demand, looking at the industries in an area and local jobs, how affordable that living is that housing is, for the local community and local workers, and community sentiment. So using the community view survey to measure that sentiment currently, and looking to the future as well. So those future populations of projected need and projected need for housing, for infrastructure, for services, community visions. So having gone through that community feedback cycle, getting the community sentiment, you're looking at, well, how does the community see this area into the future? And what transitions in industry are occurring now? Are there any industries coming into the area? So some of our tools that can help you do this, the Profile, Atlas and Housing tools can help you in that kind of reflection of the past. Our Housing ID tool can help you look at the local housing costs and affordability. The Views is the community sentiment survey, and Economy ID looking obviously at the local economy. And looking into the future, Views, Economy and our Forecast ID tool helping to forecast population growth. We also have consulting services, a key worker analysis, for example, a housing needs and capacity analysis. We also look at development feasibility as well. So to wrap all of this into a neat little bow, what does all of this tell you? So looking at all the demographics that we have, thanks to Boris and to Glenn as well, that communities are more diverse and they're more mobile than ever. So it's critical to understand who you're planning for and who you're working with at a really granular and at a human level. So not just that higher, state level, even a regional level, not even just at the local government area level. Sometimes it's very critical to get down to local small areas, particularly when you're looking at housing affordability. And then to reflect on that, to measure, and then to plan and for the future and to repeat that cycle. So that's all we have to present for you today, but we'll open up now for questions and hand it back over to you, Lisa.
Fantastic. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to throw it into the chat or Q&A function or raise your hand. and we can throw to you and kind of get those answers.
While we're waiting for people to come in, I might just explain, because we had to rush through that complex explanation earlier about the top 10 workers. We're quite often asked about key workers, and we didn't have it in our housing ID site, but we decided to put in there the top 10 occupations. And the reason for that being, key workers are, even though you can have an essential worker definition, so your teachers, police, childcare workers, things like that, what is essential to a council in particular is very unique to that area. So it's up to councils to define who their key workers are. But what the census tells us is the top 10 occupations as at the census. And it also gives us the average household income for those occupation groups. So we measure in that tool, what that data was demonstrating was the affordability of the average household income where an occupation, where one of the household residents is has an occupation within those top 10 groups. So I hope that's made it clearer and not more complex. I did see a hand go up.
Yeah, we have a question from Jared. You put it in the chat, but do you want to just ask it yourself, Jared? You might still be on mute. What I'll do is I'll throw it out. Feel free to add anything else in there. So he asked the question, how long has this data been measured for? And what was the main source from the census?
It depends on which data you're referring to, Jared, because there's a lot of different data points that have different kind of time series. Glenn, you're probably best placed to answer this anyway.
Yeah. So the overview, there was a couple of things. So the overview of the characteristics of regional WA, that was census based, and I did mention that some of that is a little bit out of date. We had some the population. Sorry, we had the migration numbers and population, which are updated annually by the ABS. We also do our own population forecasts, and many councils subscribe to those, which use the current trends along with the known development sites to assess future population. But we have annual population updates from the ABS and annual migration updates. So those will be those are of course subject to review after the next census as well. And then there was the housing prices and affordability. They come from PropTrack originally, which is the REA group, realestate.com.au, and then we calculate the affordability from that. So there's quite a few different data sources in there.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. More specifically, it was to looking at the profile.id and atlas.id. So that data is being measured from those sources that you just mentioned. Is that my understanding?
Profile and Atlas is predominantly census data, and particularly at the small area level it is. There is some annually updated population growth numbers, monthly updated building approvals, job seeker, annual migration numbers. But the core of it, which is about understanding the population characteristics of place, we do need to go back to the census for that, because it's really the only source for that small area information. There's a wealth of information in there from the census. And certainly, yeah, we're all hanging out for the next census in 2026, which is only less than a year away now.
Yep, no worries. Thank you.
We've got a question from Mark. What does your development potential analysis look like?
Is that development potential? I was just going to ask.
I'm not sure what's referred to as development potential. Is that in our forecast, or is that referring to the like the precinct feasibility?
Probably the precinct feasibility, because I mentioned the being able to measure development feasibility.
Okay, Boris, you might want to take that.
Yeah, so if it's precinct feasibility, that's with our sister company, Value Australia, using an automated valuation model, which we overlay population futures on top of that, including our residential development forecast. So that's what we're using, and that will allow you to market test feasibility of developments based on different planning or building typologies as part of that. If you're referring to residential development forecasts, that's within our forecast ID module, where we've got a team of forecasters that looks at all residential developments and maps it all out as part of a forecast ID subscription for your local area, so you can understand when are those residential developments forecast to come online. And we're about to go through a round of engagement with our forecast clients to just make sure we truth check those with our clients to make sure they're reflective of what's happening on the ground. I'll probably just add on to Glenn's comments around some of the data sources as well. For the Living in Australia survey, that's an annual benchmark survey that we do in May every year as well. And that's where those livability kind of importance and experiences come from that Crystal was referring to. And I've just popped down the benchmark results through a link in the chat there as well. Whilst I've got the hot mic as well, I saw Karen's question about drilling down the figures in each region. We would love to be able to do that. If there is a group of councils within the wheat belt that would like to have a chat with us on how we could potentially fund that piece of work, we would be more than happy to have a chat about how we can bring that to life.
Amazing. We also have a question from Justin. Have eastern state buyers taken advantage of cheaper prices in regional WA, and has this contributed to the rise in housing prices?
Have a go at that one. The short answer is we don't know for sure, but we certainly know that there has been considerable migration from the eastern states into WA generally, and including regional WA. And as a general rule, yes, when metropolitan, not just from eastern states, but it could also be from Perth moving outwards. But people moving from metropolitan into regional locations do tend to push up the housing prices as areas get popular. But it will vary a lot from the wheat belt compared to the southwest. For example, you will have a lot of differences there, and I'd imagine there would be a fair bit of that in the southwest, maybe a bit less so in the wheat belt, which is some of the oldest communities in Australia. But certainly something we'd need to drill down into in there for the local regions.
Follow-up question for you, Glenn. Do we happen to know, are people moving to regional WA, so they're actually living there, or are people buying it as absentee landowners?
Yeah, so certainly people are moving into regional WA. We saw the overall numbers being positive in terms of internal migration and overseas migration. So that's not about buying property, that is about where you live, and that's certainly growing. But the other thing to remember is that in the last 2 years, 88% of all the population growth in WA has been into Greater Perth. So that leaves 12% in regional WA. There certainly would be some absentee landowners. The other thing that you've got in regional WA is certainly in certain areas is a huge fly-in workforce that don't live there. And the most popular places to live for working in those mining areas, like in the Pilbara, is the outskirts of Perth, particularly the northern and southern edges. Places like Wanneroo, Rockingham and Mandurah are very popular for people flying in. So I can't answer definitively. There would be some absentee landowners, but certainly people are moving in as well.
Thanks, Glenn. Just to dig a little deeper into that one, I know you can't answer definitively. How do you find out definitively? Is that something that ID can look at? Is that something that we sort of have to wait for the next census? Do you have a sort of idea of like what that methodology would look like for someone who is really trying to get that answer to that tricky question?
I think we would need to get some property data. It's not census data, so it's not. You would need to look at property data either from PropTrack or even from our parent company. PEXA might have something on that, but it may be confidential. So it's certainly something I'd probably, if you seriously want to have a look at that, something a consultancy team might be able to analyse, but I'm not aware of a definitive data source on it at the moment.
And the other thing to look at too for absentee landowners, so that's really about vacant homes. We can look at property transactions to see if it's a landlord or an owner occupier, but the transaction records won't show do they live there now. That's going to be looked at via councils can look at that with bin collections, water usage and power usage. That's usually how areas will do that analysis. So our consultancy team can have a discussion with anyone interested in diving further into that and where they might find that info.
And I guess census does show it by proxy in that you can see the number of homeowners or renters. Obviously, if it's a renter, then it's owned from elsewhere, but we don't know where the landlord lives. The landlord might live next door for all we know. So there's no information collected in the census on that. So you would need a supplementary data source, but certainly some of the census data could be useful.
That's really good. Thanks. Appreciate that we asked you that long without notice. So thanks for your comments.
We've got a question from Amalia. What is the current state of public social housing stock in regional WA? Is stock adequate and proportional to population needs, and are wait lists as lengthy as metropolitan areas? Do you guys capture any data on social housing?
Yeah, I think the data that we capture through social housing is census data. Is that right, Glenn, at present? And that's the most credible kind of data source that we have. What I would probably say
we do have census data on that. There are various sources for wait lists and that sort of stuff. In my experience, social housing is almost never adequate for the needs. There's always a need for more, but I'm just having a look at the numbers for regional WA at the moment. And I suppose the good news on that is that the number didn't go down at the last census. It was pretty much the same as about 13,000 social housing units across regional WA. That's all of WA excluding Perth, but we'd need to drill down into the individual areas to say that. Hi, Boris.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I don't think it's enough, and I don't think it's happening quick enough as well.
And I'm not sure about WA. Each state has state level dashboards that government provides. So I'm not sure, Boris, you might be aware, but and certainly the people on the line too, probably more aware. For WA specifically, I know for Victoria, for example, we've got the Homes Vic dashboard. New South Wales has a really good dashboard. I'm not familiar with WA's, but they can often give you information on the wait list levels and particularly areas as well. But yeah, it's something I'm not familiar with for this particular state.
Any other questions that anyone wants to ask? Kind of final chance to throw it in the chat or just raise your hands.
Just quickly, Lise, I've just popped on the chat the example for Albany, who's one of our clients, and you can look through the atlas to look at housing tenure through the map selector and look at social housing, and you can kind of understand through that map the spatial dimension to social housing within that local area as well.
Amazing. Thanks, Boris. Well, in that case, I might leave it there. Can I just say a massive thank you to Glenn, Crystal and Boris for today's presentation. All of us data nerds in the room were probably absolutely frothing for it. We will send, as I mentioned, a post-webinar email with the slides, and there will be a little survey to get some feedback on future webinars. If you want to have a chat with anyone from the .id team, just feel free to reach out to them through that, or let me know and I can connect you. Quick plug for a few WALGA things that are coming up. We are looking at holding a number of other webinars and events before the end of the year, so definitely look out for those. Our case study guide that you might have seen some nagging emails from me about, we'll be also launching in the coming months, and we'll have an event specifically for that. In terms of keeping touch with all of these things, if you're not registered for our newsletter or part of our Teams group, you're definitely missing out. So I will add those links in the email I send around with how to join, so you can just stay up to date with all that's happening. I promise we don't send out too much stuff. And that's it from me. Thank you again to everyone who joined today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lisa. Can I just add just before we go too? I did pop that slide up at the end there because that if you do scan that one, it's a different QR code. People can download the slides directly, or it just sends you to a contact us form. So I put that up because you can either request to download these slides, but we will send them out to you anyway. But if you did have any further questions for our team, wanted to explore the Precinct Feasibility Explorer or talk about looking into your local housing economy, anything like that, you can directly contact us that way. And I did also have a final page on that Mentimeter that you were on before. If you did want to fill out a quick survey for us at the ID team in terms of the presentation itself, you'll see that that page is sitting on the Mentimeter. But thank you so much.
Justin's on top of it. He just said that statement 5 is empty, so it just says statement 5.
Yes, I
So
just noticed that too.
maybe
Thank you very
you
much,
don't answer
Justin. Yeah. I will remove that one, but fill out the other questions on there if you would like.
Thanks again, everyone, and thanks to the .id team.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.